All right, now we're getting into each individual credit, and we will have the ever-changing amounts in the resources within the lesson. So, those do change year to year. We want to make sure we have the updated amounts. However, there are some amounts that do not change. We've got the maximum qualifying expenses amount. Some of those we'll see. So this credit here is designed to help working taxpayers offset the cost of childcare or care for a disabled dependent or spouse. We've got a couple key points here. Well, we've got a credit percentage. The credit is going to be calculated as a percentage. We'll see it here of work-related child independent care expenses ranging from 20 to 35% depending on the AGI. Those AGI amounts, again, do change year to year, so we've got those included separately. Now, the maximum qualifying expenses are $3,000 for one dependent child and $6,000 for two or more dependent children. So at minimum here, you're going to have $3,000 for one child, 3,000 times two for two children, but anything over two children still capped at 6,000. For eligibility here, the child must be under the age of 13 or a qualified dependent or spouse. So we see here, and we will dive into it more on that specific slide, but the child independent care credit, children need to be under 13, whereas for the child tax credit, that's under the age of 17. So again, just a difference there, but again, we will dive into those more as we see them. Disabled and cannot care for themselves. If it's a child, the child does not need to be a direct descendant of the taxpayer, only a qualifying child. To which we say, if you don't know what that means, go all the way back to our filing status lesson. Make sure you understand what a qualifying child is. Now, here are the credit percentages based on AGI. There's a lot to memorize here. I'm going to address that point now. And do you have to memorize every single credit amount, every single phase out? No. I mean, is it better? In a perfect world, would it be better if, well, in a perfect world, you wouldn't have to memorize this to begin with. But in a perfect world, if you memorized every phase out amount, would that benefit you? Yeah, I mean, yeah, it would. You'd have more assets at your disposal when you're taking the exam, more things in your memory bank. But there's only going to be, so much memory storage you got in your brain. So you're going to do your best to memorize as much as possible. Stuff like this is going to be more important, right? The maximum expenses that you can deduct versus the AGI ranges. And what I say for AGI ranges, like as a responsible instructor, I'd say yes, memorize them all. But knowing that is incredibly difficult, try to gauge an idea of where that phase out begins and ends. Because let's say generally these phase outs might be between $75,000 and $150,000. I'm just saying that you'll kind of get an idea as you go through and see all the phase out amounts. Well, if the AGI is $20,000, that's significantly less, and we know it's not going to be affected. Or if someone's AGI is $500,000, that's going to pretty much be above, significantly above the any phase out amounts that we have, unless inflation goes absolutely crazy and you watch this, 2 years after, after recording and it absolutely goes out of the water. So just something to keep in mind. I like to give general test approaches as we go through. And distinction here, as mentioned, this is different than the child tax credit, which provides a tax credit based on the number of qualifying children without consideration for child care expenses. Totally butcher that word, consideration. That is not a word. Just trying to have fun and not lose my mind, as I'm sure you are as well. Let's see it in action. Well, let's assume that we have a single parent with an AGI of $25,000, one dependent child under 13, and they incur $4,000 in work-related childcare expenses. So maybe that's sending them to childcare while they're at work. For the current year, we're going to assume the following credit percentages based on AGI. So as mentioned, these will change year to year, and these will be linked in the resources, and you should memorize these. But these are provided here as an example for us, so we'll reference these as we go. So your AGI must be less than or equal to 15,000 to avoid that, right? For the 35%. For individuals with the AGI over 43,000, you're going to be phased out. And then we've got this phase out range in the middle. First step, we want to determine the applicable credit percentage. Well, since the AGI is $10,000 over the 15,000, we see that we have AGI of 25. We have that over the 15,000. The credit percentage is reduced by 5%. That's 1% for every $2,000 from 35% to 30%. Next, we want to calculate qualifying expenses. Now, the maximum qualifying expenses for one dependent child are $3,000, as we saw in the previous slide. Since the parent's actual expenses are $4,000, we're capped at $3,000. Great, you actually had $4,000. Sorry, you can't take that extra $1,000. And because we've got a little calculation here, we got that 30%. We're going to calculate the credit. 30% of $3,000 is going to give us $900. Now, in this example, the parent would be eligible for a $900 child independent care credit on their tax return. However, do note that this is non-refundable, meaning it can only reduce the taxpayer's tax liability to zero but it cannot provide a refund beyond that. Hey there! Are you ready to not only pass your CPA exams, but truly understand and enjoy the material while studying? I know it seems impossible, right? Especially to enjoy the material? We'll do it together. Tap into the power of CPA.examprep.ai, where we've got personalized quizzes, multiple choice questions, memorization guides, flashcards, simulations, all tailored to your learning. Our adaptive study planning puts you on the fastest path to success and lifts you back up if you fall behind. Avoid wasting your precious time and money attempting an exam with a low chance of passing, because who wants that? We want to get you through this process as quick as possible. Our exam readiness prediction lets you walk in with confidence, knowing that you're prepared for success on exam day. Thankfully, there's no payment method needed to get started, so why don't you come join us? Visit cpa.examprep.ai and let's achieve your exam success together.